Welcome to G-Spot, the podcast. I am your host, Gina Swire, international expander to humans, best-selling author of P.S. I Love Me, kink, eros, and business activator, and your favorite DJ G-Spot. I'm on a mission to explore the intersection between consciousness, kink, transformation, and humor, unlocking pleasure and liberating souls along the way. This podcast is for anyone ready to step into their sexual liberation, personal transformation, and fullest expression, all whilst having a wild and hilarious time. So I am super excited to have this beautiful guest that was a full fuck yes to have on the G-Spot podcast. Her name is Adrienne. The Yoni Nutritionist is a certified holistic nutritionist who helps women to heal the root cause of reoccurring vaginal infections with holistic nutrition and lifestyle practices to help them feel confident in themselves and in their sexuality. She specializes in helping women to prevent common infections like yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis, UTIs, candida overgrowth, HPV, and genital herpes. As a passionate sex health advocate and educator, she teaches people about these common infections to end the shame and the stigma so that so many people feel around their sexuality. The holistic practices that Adrienne teaches her clients is what helped her heal once recurring infections. She is leading by example, helping women all over the world to do the same. So thank you, Adrienne, for being here on the G-Spot podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to get to have these fun conversations with epic women who are doing just epic things in the world that are so freaking needed from experience of having them as well.
Yes.
So how did you get into this?
Oh my God. I honestly have struggled with my own vaginal health for most of my sexually active adult life. With recurring yeast infections was the first one that I started experiencing at a very young age when I became sexually active. And then I got very early in my life, I was diagnosed with both HPV and genital herpes in the same year. So that was kind of a double whammy. And this was 20 years ago. So back then there wasn't a lot of information about this stuff. You know, nobody knew anything about this stuff because we weren't taught properly. And the problem was when I started getting these infections back to back and more than just once, I started getting these recurring infections, and I would go to my doctor and they would just send me home with prescription medication, but my infections would always come back. And it was just like, okay, there's something going on in my body. What is going on? But my doctor couldn't help me. And that's when I started to take the matters into my own hands and do my own research. And I started learning that vaginal health is very much connected to our gut health. And I was able to heal my once recurring infections with my diet, by changing my diet and my lifestyle, taking specific supplements, working a lot on the trauma and shame that I felt about these things. And I rarely get infections anymore. And that's when I was like, oh my God, why isn't anybody talking about this? I quit my corporate life in my mid-30s, my corporate career, and I went back to school to study holistic nutrition so that I could help women who are going through these things, whose doctors can't help them, who are looking for alternative solutions to their health, because gone are the days where we can solely rely on our doctors anymore. They're missing the biggest piece of the puzzle, which is healing the root cause. And the problem with these infections is that they leave like a residue of trauma. For anyone who is listening who has experienced any kind of recurring vaginal health issue, it affects your sex life, it affects your self-confidence. It affected me and my life in ways that I could never have imagined. So this is why, understanding your vaginal health from a holistic approach is really, really important to understanding how to heal the root cause of recurring infections. And that's what I do.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, I am so grateful for people like you because every day I see you popping up on my Instagram with great tips and great energy and permission slips that you can change these things. And honestly, I personally struggled with UTIs for 10 freaking years.
Oh
10
my God.
years of prescription medication, desperation, just just completely not knowing what to do, trying everything, every natural supplement, everything out there, everything I was reading about, and there's hardly any information. Every time you read anything, it literally gaslights the fuck out of you by saying you're unhygienic, you're wiping back to front. I mean, no, it's not that. This is so basic. And then also getting shamed for having sex, basically. Like, oh, it's the sex thing, like it's the honeymoon problem. And it's like, wait, I'm 10 years in, like why am I still getting this? Yeah, it's wild and you just feel so alone in it. And I know so many women, so many of my clients struggle with these things too. So I'm so grateful that you're tackling this from the root.
Yeah, and it's so, a lot of women feel a lot of shame around these things, and we are very much gaslit by our healthcare professionals and doctors that we're supposed to trust with our health. And then it gets to the point where they don't know how to help us, and it just becomes so emotional and frustrating as you have experienced dealing with these things. And you don't really have anybody to talk to because nobody really gets it unless they've been through it too. you
Yeah.
know? How did it make you feel when you were going through this
Oh,
10-year phase?
like, um, well, the first thing is that I shouldn't be having sex. Like, I need to stop. Like, this is it made me, it put emphasis on what I don't believe about sex, but how I grew up about sex. Like, you shouldn't be having sex. Sex is bad, sex is taboo, sex is wrong, sex is all these things that I was never told the message that sex is literally the healthiest thing for your life and you should be having it and you want to be having it. That's where your vital wellspring comes from. So, quite often in my late teens, early 20s, I'd just be like, oh, I should just stop, and just not bother. Because every time I do this, I get this horrible thing that really is painful. And then I have to take the pills and it doesn't work anyway. And it's still in my system. Also, because I was a big drinker, growing up in the northwest of England, binge drinking, having sex combo. And then I get UTI. And, it's like, oh, well, shouldn't be drinking, shouldn't be having sex, and all the shame of it. And it just felt miserable. It felt hopeless. And everyone around me was getting it as well. It wasn't just me, it was pretty much everyone. Most people had cystitis, had a UTI, had BV. And it's like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so hard because then it makes you afraid to have sex because then you're afraid that you're going to get an infection and going to have to go through the cycle of treatment all over again. The antibiotics that just, everybody hates taking antibiotics, but you can't avoid them, especially with UTIs and BV, because you don't want those infections to get worse.
Yeah.
And when it keeps happening, it's just like, what can our doctors do beyond the medication to help? Not much. And unless you try to figure it out yourself, it's a full-time job. And I know because I've made it my full-time job. But
Literally.
it's so hard and people feel so isolated and alone.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also, the thing is that, once you get the raging infection, and there's no mistaking it, like it's like it's like fire running through the whole body. I personally feel like I've been poisoned. Like, I feel like I've got flu. And I find it so wild that, well, in England anyway, you have to book an appointment to see the doctor. and then they have to give you the prescription, and then you can't get the drugs anyway straight away. So you've basically had 3 days of hell where it's getting worse and worse and worse, and you just feel so drained. And I just find that so interesting as well, that they want you to have these pills, but they won't give you them when you actually really need them. And there's nothing to stop you. It's like it's a double whammy.
It's so hard. And I'm in Canada, so we have free healthcare, and it's just kind of the similar, like you have to wait to get an appointment, to wait to go to see the doctor, to wait to get your prescription. I really feel for people in the US who have to pay, extra for these things and have to keep going back and keep paying. And it's just like a never ending cycle. And, as a holistic nutritionist, I fully believe in taking the medication because, like I said, you can't not treat these infections. Sometimes you have to take the antibiotics.
Yeah.
But with a holistic approach, like what I teach my clients is I teach you, okay, here's how to change your diet and your lifestyle. Here's why all of these things are happening. Here's what the root causes are. And here's how we're going to address them with a specific approach to help you learn how to manage these to prevent them from coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And yeah, well, I'd love to dive into a little bit more about that. And also, the other thing that I absolutely love about you is that you are just so sex positive. We're doing this because we're supposed to be doing sex, doing sex. This is something that is healthy for us. And as a holistic practitioner, recognizing that just removing this from your life or not getting to experience all these fun things that we can do sexually is not an answer. No, we need an answer so we can fully express. And I love how expressed you are, and you share so much about your own sex life and your own sexcapades, and I find it so empowering.
Yeah. I mean, like you said earlier, sex is the most pleasurable experience in life. And unfortunately, a lot of us were taught that sex is something to be ashamed of, and it's bad. The amount of people who, tell me that they feel like they're being punished with a genital herpes diagnosis. I'm like, what do you mean? I mean, where does that mindset come from? These are old things that we were taught, which are based on also religious roots, and I think it's so sad to hear that this is still people's point of view and how they see sex. I mean, of course, nobody wants a genital herpes diagnosis. Nobody wants these recurring infections. It's miserable to deal with. But when you can learn how to manage these infections, because all of these things are very possible to manage, and you can start seeing it from that kind of a view instead of, this is so shameful and I'm being punished and I shouldn't have had sex. Like, no, you should have had sex because you're out and living and enjoying your life, as we all should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Fully agree. Yeah. And I guess this brings us on to the conversation. I just had one of these conversations the other day. Of the safer sex conversations as well, which I'm a massive advocate of. I'm sure doing what you do, you're an advocate of too. Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, I think everybody's out here having sex, but nobody wants to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you live with herpes, for example. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on people to disclose that they have herpes to potential partners. And I personally believe that it is always the right thing to do. But there is an area of a gray zone. It's not as black and white as people think. And what I mean by that is, I think it's really important to have sexual health conversations, whether or not you live with herpes, because it's almost 2025. Everyone's dating everybody. Unless you're in a monogamous relationship, there are other partners involved. And I think it's healthy to have sexual health conversations and open conversations with your partner or partners. And that's not only a herpes disclosure, which is important, but it's like, hey, I want to let you know that I have herpes. Have you ever been with anybody who has that? Or have you ever experienced any STIs with other partners before? When was the last time you were tested? A lot of people, particularly who live with these STIs and deal with these recurring infections, they feel so much guilt and shame. And it can be a very traumatic experience because most of the time, especially with herpes, a lot of us weren't given the choice. We got herpes from somebody who didn't disclose to us. They didn't know that they had it, or they did, they just didn't tell us, whatever the reason. There's a lot of shame there. So a lot of people are so scared to have these conversations, and then they just like dump onto people. So what I tell people is, instead of it being this like disclosure or a confession, having an open discussion about it and asking questions and understanding what their experience has been like. Because if they haven't come across these things by now, and then if you decide that you're going to proceed and have sex, you can talk about whether or not you want to use condoms, and how you can have a healthy sex life with the best safe sex practices that you can. Disclosure conversations doesn't protect against STIs, but it helps bring awareness around it. And your partner will trust you so much when you tell them that information, because especially when you know how to take care of yourself with it, and you know the signs and symptoms, and if something doesn't feel right, we're not having sex. And they can feel reassured and trust you with that information, that your body and you're going to protect them. But it's not all on you. Like, you want to understand what your partner's sexual health history is like as well.
Yeah, so key. Yeah, and I would imagine that a lot of people listening to this are relating. And often, in the field that I'm in and you're in, it's quite common to disclose these things or have these things and share these things, or even share on social media certain things, because it's like liberation from it. And yet there's so many people out there, of course, who maybe have these things. It's still in the shadows. They're still feeling a lot of shame around it. They've never told anyone. They're hoping they don't pass it on to people, and I mean, until I was living in Bali, that's how I used to feel as well. Like, I wouldn't have known what to say. So it really is quite a journey, and it is all part of sexual liberation to firstly become okay with it in yourself, forgive yourself that you didn't know you were going to get it, and this person didn't have the skills and the communication, and that they were probably living in the shadows and hoping they weren't going to pass it on. And so it's a whole series of things of forgiveness and then self-love and then communication, and it's all part of a journey. And there's so many people like yourself who support people with this, the emotional side and then the physical side. So yeah, if you're listening and you're like, oh my God, I actually have something and I'm still living in the shadows, then that is all part of sacred sexuality, to bring it out of the shadows. And you don't have to say it on social media, like some people do. But saying it to a partner is actually empowering you and your sex life, and how deep you get to go with someone, excuse the pun.
Yeah. Yeah. Because also, having these conversations really do build a foundation of trust from the beginning.
Yeah.
And especially if you live with herpes and you're disclosing and sharing this information vulnerably and openly with somebody, people always respect that. And whether or not they're okay with it, they always respect it. And the people who usually aren't okay with it are the people who just don't know enough about it, and they're scared of it.
Yeah.
But if they're only as confident as you are, and like you said, Gina, the confidence starts with you, and the forgiveness and acceptance, because I feel like a lot of the shame from what I hear from people is because that they didn't know any better, quote unquote. I should have known that this could have been this, but like, how would you know if you didn't know? Exactly. Hindsight's always 20/20,
Exactly.
Good for you for getting out there and living your life and, enjoying yourself.
Yeah. Also, for anyone listening, I personally do, before connecting with anyone, sexually, but even honestly, like just even kissing someone, I will always have this conscious conversation, which is like a safer sex conversation. I've talked about it before, but just to bring it in here, it's from ISTA, which is a course that I've done. Have you done it?
I haven't, no,
Haven't.
but I've been very interested in doing it.
Oh yeah. It's called International School of Temple Arts. It's something that I personally think that at a certain point of your evolution, it can be an amazing tool. I don't recommend it to everyone because it is around sexuality and, there is some controversy around this course. However, for me, in my lived experience, it was incredible. And one of the tools that they teach in ISTA is this safer sex conversation. So it's RBDSMA. It's an acronym. It sounds like RBDSM, which we love. This is where, when you may have a sexual connection with someone, you literally say, hey, are you open to having a conscious conversation? Are you in any relationships that this can affect? Do you have any boundaries here? D, what are your desires for this? Like, what are your desires for today? What are your desires for this relationship? Is meaning. What does this mean to you? Is this a one night stand? Do you want to have a relationship? Do you want to have kids? Is this, what is this for you? And then RBDS. Oh, I missed the big one. S. So S is STIs or STDs. When was the last time you were checked? Do you have any STDs? Have you ever had any? What's your relationship to this? And you both reveal this. And with that, if someone's like, I got checked a year ago, I've had 2 sexual partners, I don't know if they've been checked, then it's, well, for me anyway, that's an absolute no-no until someone's been tested. And this is how you get to have this safer sex conversation. So RBDSM, so that's the meaning I already spoke about. And then A is aftercare. What do you desire in terms of aftercare? If we are to have a connection, how do you like to have cuddles after it? Do you like to have a phone call the next day? Do you want to go for breakfast? And obviously you don't know if this person's going to do this, but you get to speak your desires and then they get to do what they want. And in my experience, when you do this conversation before a connection, you can go so much deeper within your boundaries because you feel safe and you know, hopefully, that you've checked with them, they've been tested and it's all good and you can go into it. It's not in the back of your mind like, what if they've got something? Do I need to get tested tomorrow? Like, all that is taken out of it and it is so, 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 so good. And it's super edgy to do sometimes. Like, I love doing it, but like for some people it's like, oh my God, I'm going to ask them all these really intimate questions when I don't even really know them. And I'm like, you're going to put their cock in your body. Like, that's pretty intimate.
Yeah. Your face is going to be in their ass.
Yes.
So,
it's like, pick your intimacy. Do you want to be getting intimate with the gynecologist tomorrow, or do you want to have a quick chat beforehand?
Yeah, and I think this is so great because especially women who get recurring vaginal infections, looking at this from a yoga perspective is it's very much root chakra, sacral chakra stuff. And some of the imbalances of the root chakra are not when you don't feel safe, when you don't feel secure, when you have those feelings of unsettled, you're not settled. And having these conversations can really help relax the nervous system, especially if you're sensitive.
Yes.
And prone to infections. So yeah, like I know having this kind of a conversation, I would feel so comfortable going into a situation, especially nowadays, like with the dating world, the way it is these days, it's just like, I feel like the consciousness has just been taken out of it. But yeah, I know not everybody feels comfortable getting that vulnerable with somebody that they don't really know very well. But like you said, you're going to be putting their genitals in your body.
Yeah, it's a good one to do. Yeah.
And it really is important,
Mm,
It really enhances the sexual experience. And for, if you do get recurring infections and if you're worried about it, like it takes such a pressure off because some women feel like the responsibility is all on them. Well, actually, it's not. You know,
no.
having these conversations, how the other person is equally as responsible as you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that in about the root chakra because there is obviously like a real energetic point thing to all of these as well. And actually I think I might have told you this in a message when I was actually having a UTI, and I think I messaged you. So I got these UTIs for 10 freaking years and it was hell. It was all the time, back to back antibiotics, just never really cleared. Horrendous, horrendous. And one day I was in Bali and I got it again, the worst I'd ever got it. And I was like, right, I am going on basically a vision quest. I'm going out into the wilderness and I know I have the answers inside of me and I'm not coming back until I have the answers. That was where I was at with it. I was so desperate. And off I went with my journal and I just started to write. And I'd heard from having a session with this kind of tantrika woman and also about sexual health. I'd heard that it was connected to resentment to the masculine and also feeling pissed off. And so I was like, interesting. It was kind of the first time I was hearing this because I'd just been slammed with antibiotics for 10 years. And yeah, so I went on this journey and I started to release resentment with my dad and different partners. And yeah, and I did this project around it. And after that, I didn't get a UTI again for like 2 years. And I was like, and the other thing was that my mum had never had a UTI. And I got one, I think, when I was like 20. And I was like, what is this horrendous feeling? And then I went to the doctors, you got a UTI. And a few days later, my mum got her first UTI. And then we had them simultaneously for 10 years. And when I healed it, I shared it all with her because we've been trying to get rid of it for years. And I told her, and she did a project around releasing resentment as well. And we both cleared it for a time. And I was like, wait, what?
That's so interesting because I was going to ask you how you got rid of it. And when I first started, this journey, before I even started this journey, when I was still in the corporate world and all that stuff, I would have thought that this stuff was bullshit, this woo woo shit. I never would have believed it until I went through it myself. And I started noticing that particularly, so I've lived with herpes for 20 years, and in the first 15 years, it wasn't really an issue. I never really had any outbreaks, no problems. All my partners were okay with it after I told them it was fine. But when I went to school to study holistic nutrition, I was mega, mega stressed, and I started getting recurring herpes outbreaks once or twice a month for 3 years. And
Wow.
it was just like I couldn't get them under control. And they would always come up when I didn't feel safe with men. Whenever I would start dating somebody new or the pressure of having sex, of disclosing and all that, but like when I didn't quite feel safe with somebody at the beginning of a relationship is always when I would get an outbreak.
Mhm.
And it's very much metaphysical. Like every day I hear these women saying, I get recurrent BV, recurrent UTIs, and then I broke up with my partner and I stopped getting them.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's a physiological part of that. It can be, but it also very much can be metaphysical because these emotions, if you still have a lot of anger and resentment towards men or whatever in your life, if you're
Mhm.
holding those emotions still in your body, it can very much manifest itself into disease. There are books that I've read. The Body Keeps the Score
Yeah.
is one of them. It's like your nervous system remembers this stuff. Your subconscious, you may not remember, but your subconscious remembers. And there's
Yes.
also another book called When the Body Says No. And it's like
Mm.
this stuff is scientifically proven that, if you still have these traumas stored in your body, it will come out as disease.
Yeah.
And like isn't it interesting that some women get chronic vaginal infections?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, some people get chronic bronchitis, some people get chronic vaginal infection. Like, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
And when I could work around that, like healing the masculine relationship, starting to feel safe with men again, really doing a lot of work because it goes back to my childhood. I'm a child of divorce. My dad pretty much emotionally abandoned me, and my stepfather was an abusive alcoholic. I never felt safe with men growing up. So I had to
Mm.
really do a lot of work around that. And I haven't had an herpes outbreak in a year.
Wow.
Year.
Celebrating that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
barely get them anymore. It's not even an issue, even in new relationships now.
Great.
Yeah.
Wow. So good. So
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The Body Keeps the Score. Read that book. Totally get it. And yeah, I do think that, yeah, feeling safe with men, say what you were saying before as well, I had a big breakup in the summer, and towards the end I was starting to get UTI infections again. And I was like, wait, what? I've cleared this, this is well way in my past. And then all of a sudden, there it is, there it is. And like you say, obviously there's a physical, because we were having sex and we were doing things that, um, yeah, like that could cause that. But then it's like, but I know that I've been having sex and doing all these wild things and not having that for years.
Yeah.
So I know it's not that. But then the stress, and also I do think our bodies are like, I think my body just knew, like, this is not it. Like, get the hell out. And I would get it every ovulation. Every time I was about to ovulate, I would get a UTI. And I honestly now look back in my diary, like my moon cycle diary, and I'm like, that was just preventing me from having a baby with that man,
Hmm.
because that
Interesting.
wouldn't have been good for me, and it was protecting
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. And
Right.
since we broke up, I've had none, and I just know it's completely gone out of my system. I could do anything now and I wouldn't get it. It's just
Mm.
gone. It's like an entity.
It's like she knows before you do. It's the same thing with me. It's like the herpes outbreaks or yeast infection or BV. It's like your vagina is literally like, nope, nothing's going in here until we figure this out.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's another great way to look at it is, especially for people who feel a lot of shame around their vaginal health and around these, if you get recurring infections or if you live with herpes, whatever. It's like if you can see it as your body trying to give you a message that it needs support and it needs help and it's trying to protect you.
Mm,
I used to go into like an anxiety spiral and be so hard on myself when I would get these infections. But when
yeah.
I started seeing it as like, okay, what is my body trying to tell me? Like, what's the lesson here?
Mm,
That's when I started really like, fuck you, shame and stigma. Like, I started having a different perspective on it and started improving my relationship with my body and my vagina and my sexuality because of it too.
oh, this is so good. I mean, that's the goal. That's the liberation there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
not.
going forward, it's like you start to create that safety and security within yourself.
Mhm.
And then you know that you're going to be okay no matter what happens or no matter what partner comes to you because you're so good with yourself and your sexuality, even if you're getting infections. It's like, okay, what's the lesson here? What's my body trying to tell me? Do I need to change something? Do I need to relax and slow down?
Yeah, this self love 101. Let's not shame ourselves. Let's love ourselves through it. Let's trust our bodies. Let's listen to our bodies. Let's listen to our pussy. Tune in with her, thank her, love her. Like I just love all of this. It's so much gold.
Yeah, look at her in the mirror and give her some positive affirmations.
Yeah.
That's also another thing that helped me, especially when I had an infection. Thanking her for all the pleasure that she's giving me, telling her how beautiful she is. It's like doing positive affirmations for yourself. When you start to practice that, you'll start believing it.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Okay, so on the physical side, on the nutrition side, what are some of the ways? that anyone listening can look at? Obviously, it's different for different things, but what are some of the ways that you would say, if people are listening, people can, start with?
I think the first thing is the inflammation, and I don't think people really realize how much chronic inflammation can harm the body.
Mm.
And that starts with your diet, because when you're chronically inflamed, it weakens and suppresses your immune system, which is vital to managing any kind of recurring infection and preventing them from coming back. So what does that look like in terms of your diet? Um, Everybody's favorite things, gluten, dairy, and sugar, are the highest inflammatory foods. So, of course, sugar is the worst.
Mm.
And gluten and dairy also, you want to make sure that you're enjoying moderately, because when you're eating these things consistently, it can add up over time, especially if you've got gut health issues like leaky gut, if you've got candida overgrowth. These things are some of the worst things that you can eat when
Mm.
you are sensitive to recurring infections, you're sensitive to herpes outbreaks, persistent HPV infections, yeast, BV, UTIs.
Hmm.
So gluten, dairy, sugar needs to go. At least sugar needs to go, and enjoy gluten and dairy in moderation. Like, listen, I will crush a pizza and drink a bottle of wine to myself on the week, or I used to, on the weekends, and not have an issue. But I've done the work to heal my gut. So this is, everybody freaks out. Oh my God, I'm never going to be able to eat these things again. Yes, you can, but you have to heal the root cause first. And that
Mm.
means you got to eliminate anything that's going to trigger these infections and
Hmm.
heal your gut. So
Yeah,
gluten, dairy, sugar are the first three things that need to be looked at.
great.
Any foods that are processed,
Oh, yeah. Question.
anything fake, like, I have a rule. If it grows, eat it. If it doesn't grow, eat it in moderation.
Love that.
Whole
Question.
foods is good.
Question for you. Um, if someone's listening and they're like, how do I know if obviously if you're getting infections and things, then you probably know that you have these things. How can be, is this some sort of way that people can know if they're inflamed, that they have candida, that they have leaky gut? How do they know?
If you're inflamed, you can see it because you start retaining water and you just feel puffy. Your
Mm.
face is puffy, your body's puffy, your clothes are fitting a little tighter.
Hmm.
Sometimes you'll get some things coming up on your skin, some big inflamed zits on your face or on your back, for
Mm.
example. Um, those are some examples of if you're inflamed. If your gut is inflamed, you'll have digestive issues, diarrhea, gas, bloating. Um, some things that are really common as well that people don't realize are connected with your gut health are skin issues, like sudden acne breakouts or cystic acne, or suddenly you get this weird rash that you've never had before, or you get these weird bumps on your skin that you've never had before. Like, these can be very much autoimmune things. And you're like, I've had a couple of these things pop up over the years, and I go to my doctor, I'm like, what the fuck is this? I don't know.
Here's a
All these
cream.
weird things. I don't know. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? And these are things that are always connected to your gut health, leaky gut. If your gut is like, toxins are getting through your gut barrier and getting into your bloodstream, you start experiencing all these weird symptoms, joint pain,
Mm.
sudden allergies or environmental sensitivities that you never had before. And they could just be even like small low-key symptoms that you wouldn't even really think twice about, but they're just lingering
Mm. Yeah.
over time.
Okay, great. Good to know. So physical stuff. And
Yeah.
what about like blood testing? And are you a fan of that? Do you do any of those kind of things?
I don't do any lab work personally, but you can get blood tests done. It will show you if you have candida overgrowth, or parasites or anything like that. You can do stool tests. You can do vaginal swabs,
Mm.
as well if you want to get tested for these things. But you pretty much, if you know that something's wrong,
You know.
like when I went through my episode of candida overgrowth, it was for one whole year I was suffering. and I was getting recurring yeast infections every month before my period. I started getting cystic acne all over my face. This was in my mid 30s, and I had never had acne before. And this was like deep, like big welts on my face. I was embarrassed to go out in public. I had brain fog so bad that I couldn't remember things that happened yesterday. I was drunk all the time. My boss even brought me into his office one day and was like, "Are you okay? Because your work performance is slipping."
Oh,
And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm tired all the time. I'm sleeping all the time. I had this insane sinus infection that wouldn't go away. There were signs.
yeah, yeah, got it.
And my doctor, I would go to, I'm having all these problems. And he's like, I don't know what's wrong with you. Here's a fluconazole, diflucan to treat your yeast infection. And I'm like, but this is continuing. Like this keeps
Yeah,
happening. And he's like, I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
So you kind of, you'll get to a point where intuitively you'll know something is wrong because you feel it.
yeah.
Something isn't right. And especially when you have to go to your doctor and your doctor can't explain these things because they're not gut health experts. They get no training on that.
No,
They're just there to
no,
treat the symptoms, which we need.
yeah.
But this is why you need to look at your diet, your lifestyle, your stress, the energetics and emotions of all of this as a part
Mm.
of a holistic approach.
Okay, great. Okay, so cutting out the gluten, sugar, and dairy. Number one. What else
Yeah.
we got?
We've got fried foods.
Ooh,
Foods that are high in saturated fat
mm-hmm.
are not good for your vagina,
Yeah.
especially if you're getting BV, because they are very acidic. Anything that's too acidic,
Mm.
a lot of plant-based eaters have a more alkaline diet. However, plant-based isn't always the answer either. I have more women who are plant-based eaters coming to me with vaginal health issues than anyone else
Wow.
because that diet is very high in starches and carbs.
That
So
was me.
starches and
I was
yeah,
I was vegan.
yeah, yeah. I tried it too for a year, but it made me really sick.
Yeah, I was that correlates to when I was getting really bad infections when I was veggie and vegan. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's blood sugar, right? Like the starches and the carbs and the sugars that you're eating when you're eating all of those things as a plant-based eater spikes your blood sugar,
Yeah.
which can also then create inflammation,
Yeah.
weaken your immune system, create infections.
Okay, great. So, okay, got that one. Amazing.
And what else to not eat? I mean, alcohol.
Ah.
I have an interesting relationship with alcohol because I love drinking. I love wine. I love tequila. I love cocktails. I love it all. But alcohol is not great when you're getting recurring infections.
Yeah. Yeah, 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 definitely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, same. I used to be such a big drinker. Now I don't drink very often, but like occasionally I do like to have one or even two. No more than two though, because I get so drunk. Because I'm just like one half a drink and I'm like, I'm so tipsy, which is really fun. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, also, how do you feel about charcoal after alcohol?
Yeah. Oh my God. Lifesaver.
Yeah,
Hangover remedy.
yeah. Take a couple of activated charcoals when you get home and you don't have any symptoms the next day.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Very,
Okay,
very
love that.
useful.
Okay, so alcohol. How are we feeling about caffeine?
Yeah, caffeine is technically a no-no as well, and there's a few reasons why. First of all, coffee, for example, like drinks that are high in caffeine can spike your cortisol, which is your stress hormone, especially if you're prone to recurring infections, especially herpes outbreaks. It's not good because herpes is a funny one. It's a virus that lies dormant in your nervous system, so any kind of stress can trigger it if you're sensitive.
Mm,
So the cortisol in what that's the like effect that too much caffeine, it spikes your cortisol levels. So you really want to be mindful of the caffeine that you're drinking. Coffee as well can be very acidic on your tummy,
mm,
especially if you're drinking it on an empty stomach in the morning. So my BV girlies, not good. It's also very dehydrating. So for, somebody who's prone to UTIs, you don't want to deal with that either.
yeah. Well, I've never had a coffee in my whole life.
Really?
I literally cannot bear the smell or taste of coffee. I've never ever had one.
Really?
Yeah, I think I'm probably one of the only people in the world that's a no. However, I do have these. They're called fizz sticks. They're from a company called Arbonne, and they're like natural. I think it's is it guarana? Guarana. It's like a type of caffeine, but it's like super slow releasing. And they're
Oh.
like a health food shot kind of thing. And they've got different B vitamins and vitamin C and different things in them. That's what I was drinking before. And it's like a fun fizzy drink. So like if I need an energy boost, I have that. I'm not on commission for these, by the way, but I do. That's what I have. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it depends on the sources of caffeine. Coffee isn't the greatest,
Hmm.
but I really like matcha powder, and it's a green tea powder. That's got a pretty good kick
Yeah.
of caffeine.
Yeah. And it's antioxidant and slow releasing, and you don't get the spike the same. But you
Yep,
still get high.
exactly.
We love
And
getting
HP
high.
green tea is really good if you have HPV.
Okay, good to
Yeah,
know. Okay,
yeah.
so what are some of the things we want to add in?
Okay, so the most important thing is it's not just the what to eat, it's the how to eat. And there's a
Mm,
bit of a science behind it because it's all about stabilizing your blood sugar. So you
mm,
want to make sure that you're getting enough protein in your diet. I don't think women are eating enough protein in general. You want to have at least 30 grams to 40 grams of protein at each meal, especially at breakfast. You want to
hmm.
be eating 3 times a day consistently every day. No skipping meals, none of this intermittent fasting bullshit. Please.
Mm,
Like you're naturally intermittent fasting when you stop eating at night and you wake up in the morning. But some women, with these trendy diets, they think, oh, I'm not going to eat until 1 p.m. the next day. No, please, that's the worst thing that you can do for your blood sugar and your hormones. So it's
mm,
not just the what to eat, it's the how to eat too,
hmm.
especially if you're prone to vaginal infections. If you're not, try it. If it works for you, great. But if you are experiencing recurrent vaginal infections, no intermittent fasting. So we're doing high protein breakfasts. We're trying to eat as much whole foods as we can. So lots of veggies, low sugar fruits, lots of sources of protein, and some carbohydrates like sweet potatoes, grains like quinoa. I love. I don't. I don't recommend, I don't even know if I want to launch into that, but like starchy carbs, like, pastas, rice, breads, you really want to enjoy in moderation
Yeah,
or eliminate.
yeah.
Um, Oats, everyone freaks out. Oats are not good for you.
No, I'm a no.
Oat milk, not good.
No, stop it. Oat milk has got used to have such a great PR team, and now it is going down fast, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, oats, everyone freaks out when I talk about this. And the reason why is because they spike and crash your blood sugar. They're
mhm,
starchy carbs. And with not, yes, they have fiber, but they don't have a lot of nutritional value. Maybe certain forms of oats have a little bit more protein, but you want to really avoid oats because the way the starch is converted to a specific sugar in your bloodstream and in your body after it's digested is very bad for you, particularly the oat milk. Even if you see oat milks that say no sugar added, there's this one ingredient that's called, I think it's called maltodextrin, and it's like malt.
mm,
That's sugar,
that's a no.
and it's one of the worst things that you can consume. So,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, I talk a lot about things that you think are healthy, but they're not, especially if you're struggling with vaginal infections. Fermented foods are another one that people freak out over because they're like, I thought they were good for your gut. Well, they are for the normal person who doesn't have gut health issues.
Okay.
But if you do have gut health issues, candida overgrowth, leaky gut, if you're getting these recurrent infections, no, because the fermented food is feeding the things that are fermenting in your gut, and you don't need any more fermentation than that.
Okay. You know what? I hate fermented foods. I fucking hate fermented. I hate vinegar. I hate fermented taste. All of that. I'm like, oh. And when I did my big health exploration, it's all about like adding these in. And I just I forced myself to drink kombucha and it's fucking gross. And I'm so happy to hear this. I'm like, yeah, fuck these foods.
Fuck these foods. I mean, you'd think sauerkraut is good, and it is for the normal person who doesn't struggle with these infections. But if you do, you don't want to be eating anything fermented. There a lot of like kombucha, for example, is fermented with sugar.
Yeah. I don't think it's a superfood. I think it's sweet.
No.
I mean, if it tastes like absolute ass, which obviously that can taste good, but like if it's absolutely gross, that's probably when it's healthy for you. If it tastes good, it's sweet, and then it's not good for you.
The only fermented thing that I recommend is apple cider vinegar
Yeah, I have
because
that.
it's got the prebiotics and probiotics with the mother in it. So it's the only fermented thing that I recommend. But essentially, you want to make sure that you're getting enough protein, a combination of animal and plant-based protein. You don't want to just be strictly carnivore. You want to give yourself some diversity, but you don't want to be too much on the plant-based side because it's higher in starches and carbs. Chickpeas, lentils, legumes, stuff like that. They're high in carbs and starches, which you're trying to, if you struggle with recurring vaginal infections, if you don't eat all the things that you want, but when you do, you really want to eat those things in moderation and diversify it. Switch between salmon and a salad at lunch, and then a lentil curry for dinner, or, eggs for breakfast, and then a chicken salad at lunchtime, and then salmon for dinner. Like, a protein shake in the morning, and then your chicken salmon salad for lunch, and then a chicken curry for dinner. Like, you can diversify these things. Good fats are also really good.
What do you eat for breakfast for 30 grams of protein? How many eggs are you having?
Oh my God, I drink a protein smoothie every morning.
Okay.
And my protein powder is a bone broth based protein powder. So no plant-based proteins.
No
No,
way.
because they're made with starchy carbs. Pea protein, usually rice protein. Those are a no-no when you're struggling with vaginal infections. And no whey protein because that's dairy. So I use a bone broth protein powder
Okay.
that has about 20 grams of protein. And then I also put a scoop of collagen in my matcha latte, which has another 10.
Okay.
And then I put a bunch of like chia seeds and flax seeds and all kinds of other different powders and maca and flax and hemp seeds and all kinds of other things into my smoothie. So it should be about 35 to 40 grams of protein in the morning. And sometimes I'll have an egg, 2 eggs if I'm really hungry.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we can link that in the show notes for anyone or if you have I don't know, something of that, we can send it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have that recipe on one of my Instagram posts.
Oh, great. We can link to that then. Perfect.
Yeah, I share a ton of recipes, Candida friendly recipes, Yoni friendly recipes, and not just the what to eat, but how to eat on my Instagram as well, because it's equally as important. Food combining, the order of food, the way you eat, because to support your digestive system and the process of digestion to prevent things from getting stuck in your digestive tract, and then they start to ferment, and that's what gives you the bloating and the gas.
Okay, great. I'm gonna check out this beef bone broth protein because I personally don't like protein powders. Like I feel like they're gritty and they taste weird and they're kind of like saccharine weird. I don't know. I just never liked them, so I always just have a lot of eggs and meat. But like to eat 30 grams of protein with eggs is like freaking 5 eggs or something, and I can't eat. I
Yeah.
feel sick if I eat that many eggs. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm diversifying. So love that. Okay, and the collagen added to the matcha is a great tip as well. That's really
Yeah.
and also cottage cheese as well. I know you're not big on dairy, are you? But
Oh my
maybe.
God. I love cottage cheese. I tried going back to introducing cottage cheese in my diet just this past summer because I'm like, I'm sick of these protein shakes. I need some diversity.
Yeah.
But I started getting like crazy cystic acne. And that's what happened the first time I had candida overgrowth, the cystic acne. And when I cut out dairy, it cleared up in 3 weeks.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah, I had to stop the cottage cheese because it doesn't agree with me. And I
Yeah.
was eating lactose-free cottage cheese too.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I'm okay with dairy. And you can make you can make cacao brownies with dairy with cottage cheese. There's this guy on Instagram called Shred Happens, and his recipes are all bone broth, cottage cheese, collagen, but like insane recipes that you can make fun things, and it's very low in sugar and everything. So I love following him.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you're not sensitive to dairy, dairy can be good. You just want to make sure, pay attention to what happens in your body after you eat dairy. But you want to make sure that you're getting like full fat dairy. If you're drinking milk, whole fat dairy milk. If, Greek yogurt's great, a great source of protein as well, if you can tolerate it. And if it doesn't cause any kind of inflammatory responses in your body, go for it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you start noticing things like acne or like, you're running to the bathroom to the toilet after you eat it, things like that are big indications of inflammation.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, these are all great. Is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
I always love to talk about STI testing because
Mm,
people still don't realize what's included and what's not included on standard STI panel tests.
mm,
And when a lot of people assume that when they're getting tested for STIs, they're getting tested for everything, but you're actually not.
mm,
What you're getting tested for on a standard STI panel are HIV, gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, as well as I think you can request to get tested for hepatitis and trichomoniasis, but you're not being tested for herpes and HPV, which are
mm,
two of the most common STIs, yet the most stigmatized STIs.
mm.
You have to specifically ask for herpes tests on an STI panel, and depending on where you live, I think it's actually most countries you have to pay extra for a herpes test. And unfortunately, with herpes tests, and this is why they're not on standard STI panels, are because sometimes the results will come back false positives or false negatives.
Right.
The most accurate way of knowing that you have herpes is you have an active outbreak. But with herpes, it's a funny virus because most of the time it lays dormant in your body and you don't have symptoms, or you do, but you just don't know it because you didn't even realize you had herpes. And herpes is so common. Like 1 in 4 people get cold sores, which are herpes and can be transmitted during oral sex. A lot of people aren't disclosing that they get cold sores, and they're transmitting their non-sexually transmitted cold sore to someone's genitals, and then that results in that person having to deal with it completely differently.
Mm,
Just goes to show you that the stigma comes from sex.
mm.
Not the actual virus. But
Yeah.
herpes tests, you have to ask separately for it. And sometimes your doctor won't test you for it unless you have symptoms, because the results can come back false positive or false negative. And there's no HPV testing in men. So a lot of men won't know that they have HPV. They're just asymptomatic carriers of the virus unless they have genital warts, which are visible. Men will not know if they have HPV or not. And women can get tested for HPV with a pap smear. That's a different test. So you have to
Right.
ask separately for that. And HPV is the most common STI. The CDC says that 80% of the adult population, sexually active population, has HPV or will come into contact with HPV at some point. And I always like to bring up that on discussions like these, because people don't know this.
Mm,
And it's just one way that we can end the shame and stigma that a lot of people feel around these things, is being aware of this stuff and like educating ourselves on it, obviously, but also understanding there may be a lot more people who have it than we actually know about, but they're not getting tested because they
yeah.
don't know,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I didn't know some of that stuff, and I'm really like, regularly get tested, and I always ask for like absolutely everything, and share all these things. But I didn't know that you could only get the HPV on the Pap smear. Right.
Yeah.
Good to
Some,
know. Thank you.
yeah, it might be different in different countries. It's hard to know what every country what their STI protocol is, but most countries you have to test separately for that and ask separately for it.
Okay,
Because
good.
most of the time, these things, like I said, are asymptomatic and people don't know until it's like full blown in your face. And,
Mm,
they freak out, of course, totally understandable. But it might have been something that they've been living with for a long time and they just didn't know it
yeah,
because they're
exactly.
not getting tested. They don't have symptoms.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
it keeps on multiplying across our population, which is quite scary.
Yeah, I mean, the more I've in my 20 years of living with herpes, knock on wood, I've never given it to anybody. I mean, as far as I know. But awareness is the first step. Like when you're aware of it and how to manage it in your body, you can prevent transmission to your partners, you can manage it, you can feel confident in yourself with this, and it doesn't have to affect your life so drastically as it does for some people, unfortunately. And it takes some people longer. It took me about 18 years to get to this point.
Wow.
But, when I started feeling liberated and empowered within myself with it, I was like, wow, why the only person that was holding myself back, like the only person that I was hurting was me by holding myself back because I was afraid.
That's such a key takeaway here of this whole podcast is that you do have the power, we have the power, and learning about it, liberating ourselves from it, bringing it out of the shadows, being able to speak about it, being honest about it is the path. And it also heals the physical stuff as well. Like, it goes hand in hand. So thank you so much for all of your wisdom and all of the million decisions and all of the trials and tribulations that you've been to get that wisdom is just vast. Thank you for sharing it and all of the tips. You've inspired me. I'm going to go and order some collagen.
Yeah, it's so good.
So
Your
good.
hair, nails, and skin will thank you too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so good. So good. Well, do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share at all?
If you are listening and you are getting recurring infections and you're feeling really hopeless and helpless and not empowered, you can always use me and Gina as hope, of it is possible to heal these things and manage these things and feel confident in yourself with these things. It doesn't mean your sex life is over. You can still have an amazing sex life, and if you're feeling hopeless, you look to us for hope that it is possible
I love
to get
that.
there too.
Yes, and we will link everything in the show notes, but do you want to just tell them where they can find you? I know you do amazing things. What have you got going on at the moment?
Yeah, I've my main hub of everything of communications of all of the content and information I share is my Instagram at Yoni Nutritionist. I also have my website, yoninutritionist.com. I'm on TikTok at Yoni Nutritionist, and I have Facebook, Yoni Nutritionist, and Instagram is my main hub. So find me there first.
Amazing, amazing. And are you going to be doing any? Well, obviously, you have your programs people can join. Is there anything else happening at the moment that they can join?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. I've got 4 different online self-guided programs and guides to give people the tools to help manage recurrent infections, like all of the things that we talked about today. But I also have my group Candida cleanse that I do every year in January, which is coming up in less than a month now. And it's really fun. We do a Candida elimination diet all together. Whether or not you live with Candida overgrowth, an elimination diet, I feel like everyone needs to do at some point in their lives. And it really does help you to get your diet and health back on track and really understand a holistic approach to managing these recurring infections, especially if you're getting them. So that's coming up in January.
Amazing. And how long is that cleanse?
It goes until the end of February, so 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
Yeah. And I do it
interesting.
too.
Okay, amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so, so, so much. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having
Have
me.
a beautiful day. I'm manifesting you to Tulum in January.
Oh my God, I would love to.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the G Spot podcast, where pleasure meets purpose. If you loved this episode, don't forget to hit subscribe and send it to a friend who you know will love it too. Until next time, stay turned on. With love, Gina.